Tonight, we examine the pivotal moments of the Great War, focusing on the events of 1914. In July 1914, a conflict began between the Russian and German empires. To both emperors, it seemed like a routine, short-lived war. The German emperor, Kaiser Wilhelm II, told his forces, by winter, when the leaves start falling from the trees, you will have returned to your homes. On the other hand, the Russian Tsar's army was consumed by a different concern. This is just a few days' war, but after victory, we will have to shed these heavy, rough uniforms.
Should we carry the smart, regular uniforms that make us look like heroes right now, or should we have them sent home via post after reaching Berlin, so we don't have to bear this burden on the way?
Both forces were thinking along these lines, but the reality was that most of the young men were seeing their families for the last time. There would be no parcels coming from home anymore. Instead, parcels containing their bodies would be sent back. It was not going to be a short campaign, but a long, drawn-out ordeal. Many harsh winters, heavy snowfalls, frozen trenches, and frostbitten days ahead. For the emperors, it was supposed to be just a few days' war, but in reality, it extended for 1,566 days. This was the same war that history first called the Great War, and today we know it as the First World War. It was June 28, 1914, a Sunday morning. Around 11 a.m., a double phaeton car with an open roof left the town hall of Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia. Inside the car sat Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and his wife, Sophie of Hohenberg. In the front seat beside the driver was General Oskar Potiorek, the military governor of Bosnia. Franz Ferdinand seemed upset. Earlier that morning, on their way to the town hall, a bomb had been thrown at their car. He had swiftly deflected it with his arm, and although it bounced away, it exploded near the car behind them, injuring several of his entourage. Now, Franz Ferdinand and Sophie were on their way to the hospital to visit those wounded officers. But while driving, the military governor suddenly realized they had taken the wrong route. He quickly ordered the driver to turn the car around. The driver slowed down to make the turn, and in that instant, 2 gunshots rang out. At first, neither seemed to realize the severity of their wounds, but moments later, Franz Ferdinand clutched his neck and began to collapse. Sophie, panicking, asked, "What's happened to you?" But before she could finish, she too slumped over onto the seat.
Franz Ferdinand cried out, "Sophie, dear, don't die, and you must live for our children." Made no reply. Security men surrounded the car in chaos. The Franz Ferdinand, struggling to stay conscious, he kept saying, "It's nothing, it's nothing," until he finally went silent and lost consciousness. The wounded royal couple was rushed to the hospital, but doctors could only confirm what was already clear. Both were dead. When news of their assassination appeared in newspapers the next morning, the echoes of a great war could already be heard.
Because this was not just the loss of 2 lives, it was the spark that would ignite an entire world in flames. In 1914, 4 great powers dominated the map of Europe, and the Russian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the German Empire. Most of Central and Eastern Europe was either under the control of these powers or consisted of a few small states that had broken away from them. Poland, in particular, had effectively been partitioned between Russia, Germany, and Austria. Besides these, Britain and France were also major powers at the time, but their empires lay mostly outside Europe. At the heart of Europe, Austria was the largest empire, which included Hungary, the Czech lands, Slavic regions, and several other European territories. But that empire had a problem. To its south and east, several new states had emerged, for example, Serbia and Romania, which had become independent from the Ottoman Empire. The people of Serbia were ethnically Slavic, and Slavs also formed a majority in much of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. For this reason, Serbia dreamed of uniting all Slavic populated territories of the Austro-Hungarian Empire into one greater Serbia, a project they called Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia literally meant the land of the South Slavs. To realize the dream of a greater Serbia or Yugoslavia, the Serbs' first target was Bosnia, then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Austria had seized Bosnia from the Ottomans in 1878 and formally incorporated it into its empire in 1907. Serbia protested Austria's move, and anti-Austrian propaganda began to spread within Serbia. Serbian nationalists formed an underground movement to separate Bosnia from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The core organization of that movement was the Black Hand, created inside Serbia with backing from elements of Serbian intelligence. Its emblem was a menacing symbol, a skull, bones, a bottle of poison, a dagger, and a bomb. The group was set up for violent struggle and armed action. One branch of this group, called Young Bosnia, was made up largely of Bosnian Serb youth, especially teenagers. These passionate young men, with help from Serbian intelligence, carried out attacks in Bosnia. The plot to assassinate the Hungarian heir was also prepared by this group. The pistol used to shoot the royal couple had been supplied to them by Serbian intelligence. 6 assassins took part in the plot, assistance from several local collaborators. The person who fired the fatal shots at Franz Ferdinand and his wife, a 15-year-old Serb student, Gavrilo Princip. He was arrested on the spot after the shooting. The photograph, often shown and mistakenly identified as Gavrilo arrest, is actually the arrest of another suspected person. That location, not Gavrilo himself. In any case, Gavrilo was indeed captured, but he was not sentenced to death. It's because, under Austro-Hungarian law, capital punishment could not be imposed on anyone under 20. Instead, Gavrilo received a 20-year prison sentence and was imprisoned. He suffered from tuberculosis and died in prison. 4 years later, the hand of fate released him from life. In 2015, Serbia's President Tomislav Nikolic unveiled a statue of Gavrilo in Belgrade and declared him a national hero. The assassination of the Austro-Hungarian heir and his wife was an extraordinary event for such a powerful empire as Austria-Hungary. After all, the heir was to become emperor. For Austria, this was a historic tragedy, and it had been carried out with the assistance of Serbian intelligence. Austria-Hungary wanted revenge and set its sights on crushing Serbia. It shows Serbia holding a bomb and a dagger, while Austria's hand is crushing Serbia's arm, and beside it is written, "Serbia must die." This cartoon perfectly captured Austria's mood at the time. But despite its anger and thirst for revenge, Austria couldn't immediately take action against Serbia. The reason was simple. Although Serbia was a small and relatively weak country, it had the friendship and protection of a powerful empire, Russia. The Russian Empire had declared itself the protector of all Orthodox Christian populations in Eastern and Central Europe. Serbia, being an Orthodox Christian nation, was therefore a natural ally of Russia, while Austria's rulers were Catholic. Their bond ran deep, in fact. It was Russia that had helped Serbia win its independence from the Ottoman Turks in 1878. If we explain it in even simpler terms, at that time there were 2 major and clearly defined military alliances in Europe. The first alliance was between Russia, France, and Britain, and it was called the Triple Entente, or the Alliance of 3 Nations. The second alliance was between Germany, Austria, and Italy, and it was called the Triple Alliance. So in this complex game of military alliances, it was understood that a fight between any 2 countries would pull all the others into it. Both its allies and its enemies would be forced to jump into the war, whether or not the war had actually begun because of them. As was also being warned in the cartoons published at the time, if Austria attacked Serbia, Russia would attack Austria, Germany would attack Russia, and behind them, France and Britain would also come rushing in. In other words, everyone felt that no matter what reason a conflict started for, all the world powers would be compelled to take part in it. A great war would begin. Russia would attack Austria, Germany would attack Russia, and behind them, France and Britain would also come rushing in.
Here's a tragic irony of history. King George V of Britain, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, and Tsar Nicholas II of Russia were all first cousins, their bloodlines connected through Queen Victoria of Britain. Yet even that family relationship couldn't prevent what was coming.
And that was the backdrop in which Austria, seeking revenge for the assassination of its royal couple, turned to Germany for support. And the reasoning was, if Russia steps in to defend Serbia, Germany will stand in Austria's defense. Germany assured Austria of full military backing in case of war with Russia. This promise satisfied the aging Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph I, who now felt free to teach Serbia a lesson. It's worth noting, though, that Franz Ferdinand, the murdered heir, was actually a peaceful man, as known for opposing war and had sympathy for Slavic peoples, including the Serbs.
Within the Austrian government, he advocated for greater representation of Slavs.
So, ironically, the Serbs didn't just kill an heir to the throne, and they silenced a voice that might have prevented a world war and could have become their ally. And after that, what always follows such an assassination of a prominent leader did happen. The World War began. The war began with harsh warnings and ultimatums. On Friday, July 23, the Austrian ambassador in Belgrade handed an ultimatum to the Serbian foreign minister. In this document, demands were made that all those involved in the murder of the Austrian royal couple be given severe punishment. All underground movements working against Austria were to be cracked down on, and all propaganda against Austria was to be stopped. Action was to be taken against all government employees involved in such propaganda. The supply of weapons across the border, meaning into Austrian territory, was to be halted. Serbia was given 48 hours to respond to this ultimatum. Along with issuing the ultimatum, Austria also began preparing for war in order to maintain pressure. The army and navy were started to be mobilized. At least 3 Austrian naval warships took up positions on the famous Danube River of Europe. The Danube is Europe's second largest river. It begins in Germany and flows all the way to the Black Sea. Along its route, it passes through Austria's capital, Vienna, and Serbia's capital, Belgrade. These ships, traveling along the Danube, entered Serbian territory from the Austrian Empire and reached near Belgrade, fully prepared for bombardment. Serbia had no arrangements to stop them. 360,000 Austrian soldiers had also reached near the Serbian border. In comparison, Serbia had barely 20,000 soldiers, or even fewer. This force was not sufficient to face Austria, but Serbia had great trust in its ally Russia. Additionally, Serbia had also carried out large-scale recruitment on its own and prepared hundreds of thousands of volunteers.
In other words, Serbia was in the mood to resist. However, Serbia did not completely reject Austria's ultimatum. Instead, it sent a somewhat vague response. In its reply, the Serbian government stated that it desired friendly relations with the Austrian Empire.
It said it would accept all those demands of Austria-Hungary that would help prevent crimes and unrest in neighbouring countries. As a civilized state, that it was the responsibility of the Serbian government to sincerely take every possible step to maintain friendly relations with Austria.
Now, outwardly, this response seemed good, but nowhere did it state whether there would be any crackdown on the organization or government officials against whom Austria had demanded action. Consequently, Austria rejected this response and severed diplomatic relations with Serbia. The situation worsened further. On July 27, martial law was imposed in Austria's capital, Vienna. The next day, July 28, Austria declared war on Serbia. The declaration of war documents were also sent to the Serbian government in Belgrade. The First World War had begun.
When the attack on Serbia started, its ally Russia also began moving its army. Even before Russia could attack,
Germany declared war on Russia. In Russia's then capital, St. Petersburg, the German ambassador, Count Friedrich, handed the declaration of war to the Russian foreign minister, Sergei Sazonov. The Russian foreign minister said to the ambassador, "Every nation will now condemn you forever for starting this war." He said that upon hearing this and feeling the weight of those words, the German ambassador began to cry, because he too knew that starting a war is easy, but how it will end, no one knows. But clearly, he could not stop the war. So the war went on.
2 days later, on August 3, Germany also declared war on France. After Germany's attacks on France and Russia, their ally Britain could no longer remain idle. The next day, August 4, Britain declared war against Germany. On August 5, Austria started war against Russia. In short, within just 1 week, the whole of Europe had become engulfed in chaos. Only Italy remained. Despite being one of the most important allies of Germany and Austria, it stayed neutral. This was a major shock for those two powers. However, they took no immediate action over it and continued fighting because they were fully confident of a quick and decisive victory. Keep waiting for the next episode.